And now, ladies and gentlemen, it's the star of our show, direct from the bar,
PB.
I told you so. Yes, people keep saying, Pimpy, have you seen gold and silver prices? Yes, I monitor them all the time, of course. But now I'm hearing some news that they're talking about gold going to 40, 50,000. Now, we've heard that for a long time. And it's not that the information that they're using is wrong. It's just trying to figure out the timing. But let's get into this next video, because in here, they're going to prove to you once again why gold should be around 40 or 50,000. Before we get started, do me a favor, hit the thumbs up button. If you're not a subscriber, please do so, because when you do, it helps out the channel, and I certainly do appreciate it. Alright, first things first, Bitcoin at $117,437. Ethereum at $2,931. XRP, $2.72. Solana is at $160.26. Dogecoin is up to 19 cents. Cardano is at 70 cents. XLM, 39 cents. Chainlink's at $14.99. And Avalanche is sitting at $20.60. Records for Bitcoin. Gold closed the week out at $3,364 an ounce. Silver closed the week out at $38.95 an ounce. I remember when we had that drop in prices and stocks and everything went down back there in the RONA. And we seen the silver price drop as far as, here you go, $12. $12. Remember that? We seen it drop below $12 down to around $11. But look, the price was $12. That's when I was telling everybody, look, don't panic. This is the time for you to buy. Buy low. There's a reason why prices are going down, because the market was being saturated with people selling their gold and silver, which they shouldn't have. Some people didn't have a choice and they needed the money, so they sold their precious metals. And now look where we are. Silver at $38.95 an ounce. What are we looking at? A $26, almost $27 increase in value. So yeah, I've made a few people a little bit richer, thank God. But we're not done. Keep buying. Alright, let's go ahead and listen to this video, because this gentleman is going to expose something that came from the Federal Reserve. Ready?
It's open to the public, it's right here on the internet, but it doesn't really seem like it's one that was meant for public consumption, let's say. The Financial Accounting Manual for Federal Reserve Banks. And look at the date, very recent, May 2025.
Now he's talking about this baby right here. I will leave a link so you guys can come here and read it yourself.
We're going to get into that example balance sheet in a moment. But before we do, look at how this report starts. Right here, section 2-10. They talk about the gold certificate account. Now, before we get into this, let's go over to a Forbes article where they were talking about this. So again, this isn't something that's just, tinfoil hatters are talking about. This is something that it's. Now, before we get into this, let's go over to a Forbes article where they were talking about this. So again, this isn't something that's just, tinfoil hatters are talking about. This is something that it's mainstream. Now, you don't hear it often, but it is definitely within the mainstream because, not only are guys like Luke Groman talking about it, but it's right here in the Fed documents. But here is an article, is it time for the U.S. to revalue its gold reserves? Now, they're talking about doing it a little bit different way, just bringing it up to the market value. But as Luke points out, they could take it up to 20,000, 30,000, whatever they wanted to, in order to solve this quote unquote debt crisis. So first off, I want to highlight the fact the U.S., according to them, who knows if it's really there, but they say they have 8,133 tons. Now, I did the math on that for a whiteboard video today. It's right around 260 million ounces. So this article is a little old. I did the math on today's price, roughly call it 3,400. And this equates to about 856, I think it was, $billion worth of gold the United States has on their balance sheet. Okay, got it. Now let's go back to the accounting manual for the Federal Reserve. And this 2-1. Now listen to this very carefully, guys. The Secretary of the Treasury, Scott Bessent, is authorized to issue gold certificates. Now, this is just simply kind of a claim on the gold the Treasury owns. So they're not really selling it. I think technically it would still be on their balance sheet, but it's a claim that they would sell to the Federal Reserve, and the Federal Reserve books that as an asset on their balance sheet. And what does the Treasury get in return? Well, the Federal Reserve credits their account, which you guys know is the TGA, the Treasury General Account. It's a liability on the Fed's balance sheet. They credit it for however much the value is of the gold certificates they buy. Let's get back to it. And what I like about this, and which is kind of a head scratcher, because usually they're talking in code and the Fed really doesn't want you to understand or to know what their secret operations are. But here they just come right out and say it. Listen to this. Treasury is authorized to issue gold certificates to the reserve banks, in other words, the Fed, to monetize gold. They're not beating around the bush. They're literally telling you in plain English, explicitly, something they're calling it an accounting manual for the Federal Reserve banks, that they can monetize gold, the gold the Treasury has on its balance sheet. So they specifically say held by the U.S. Department of the Treasury. At any time they can do this. Treasury may reacquire the gold certificates or not. So they talk about the accounts that the Fed has with the Treasury and the Treasury has with the Fed, and this is an accounting gimmick. I mean, let's be honest here. The Treasury is just saying, okay, we'll just...
For those of you who do not know what a gold certificate looks like, it's just our money, and it says gold certificate. Some of you have seen silver certificates. Well, there are gold ones out there as well. There's still some out there. You can buy them. Collectors love them.
Make up this paper asset that the Federal Reserve will buy, and that'll go ahead and credit the TGA, and then we can take the money that's in the TGA now, and we can go ahead and use that for whatever we want. In this case, they could use that to effectively buy down the outstanding debt. So what they would do in practice is they would take the money that they now have, the Treasury, and they would wait for the existing treasuries to mature, and they would just pay those treasuries off, the principal or interest, whatever was owed, with the existing balance in the TGA that the Fed credited to them by purchasing these gold certificates that the Treasury just printed, for lack of a better word, out of thin air, that represents a claim on the gold that's probably still an asset on the Treasury's balance sheet, the gold that's in Fort Knox, as an example. And so then what happens is they pay off the existing Treasury holders with new money that didn't exist before, and therefore they don't have to, so they wouldn't have to issue more debt, in other words, to pay off the existing debt. They wouldn't have to roll it over, and that would reduce the outstanding debt of the United States by however many gold certificates the Fed purchased. See, let's get back to the report here. The gold certificates account serves as a medium. Okay, this is where they're talking about the reserve banks. I think this is kind of how the Fed justifies this as this accounting gimmick as an asset, where if I'm reading this correctly, they're saying, well, the local Federal Reserve banks around the United States could use this as some sort of settlement vehicle, something like that. Okay, sure, right. And then here, the very next 2.2, they talk about the special drawing rights, SDRs. I'm sure you guys have heard about those. But now let's go up. So here it is, plain English. This is not the tinfoil hatter economic theory. This isn't something that, oh, those stupid people on Zero Hedge, let's get them, they're just making up these theories that have no chance of coming true. No. It's right here. The Fed is telling you this is what they could very easily do. Now, let's go back to the balance sheet, which I thought was interesting. It's no surprise that, as an example, the assets would be U.S. Treasuries. Hello, we all know that. mortgage-backed securities, U.S. Treasuries, and this is how the Fed's balance sheet goes from 800 billion, and then they do QE. They buy those treasuries, they buy those mortgage-backed securities, and they monetize the treasuries. That's what they're doing. That's where the phrase monetize the debt comes from. And that's what takes their balance sheet from 800 billion all the way to a peak here in 2022 of almost 9 trillion. Almost 9 trillion. But the very first thing that is, or the very first line item, let's say, the very first thing, and oddly enough, the second one is special drawing rights, SDRs. This comes before U.S. Treasuries and before mortgage-backed securities. So the punchline here is buying these gold certificates and monetizing the gold is as legal as doing quantitative easing. It's not like we're talking about derivatives or interest rate swaps or any of those things. It's just simply the Treasury selling an asset, a gold-backed asset, to the Federal Reserve and them crediting their account, and then the Treasury using that those bank reserves to go ahead and reduce their overall debt. What Luke is saying is absolutely true. If the United States revalued their gold holdings to, let's say, 20,000 an ounce, now all of a sudden it changes the game, because then the gold that they have on their balance sheet goes from a value of, let's say, 850 billion to, let's say, 5 trillion. Number one, let's say they revalue at 5 trillion, and all of those gold certificates, 5 trillion worth, go onto the Fed's balance sheet. The Treasury in the TGA now has an extra $5 trillion that they use to pay down the debt. You're reducing the amount of treasuries that are floating around, and you're replacing that with cash. So you have $5 trillion of additional cash that's circulating in the actual economy, chasing goods and services, potentially. Just to get 5 trillion would require a $20,000 gold price. That's why I say, so if you're going to go ahead and pull the trigger, why take it to 20,000? Why not take it to 30 or 40? Now the question, I'm sure, becomes, well, George, how on earth would they do this? And this is actually the easy part. What they do is simply say, we're going to put in a bid, we the government, we're going to put in a bid for 20 grand. So if you're someone that is holding gold and you want to sell it, why would you sell it for less than $20,000 an ounce? The answer is you wouldn't. Main takeaway, guys, this is not pie in the sky stuff. If you want to fact check me, you can go and just Google Fed Accounting Manual for Federal Reserve Banks, or Financial Accounting Manual for Federal Reserve Banks, May 2025. Look it up for yourself.
Anyways, like I said, I'll have the link down below so you can just pull up that manual he's talking about. Go ahead and give it a good read. Now, that sounds exciting and all, but what does it take to actually make it happen? Somebody has to pull the trigger to make it happen. What I'm saying for those of you who own silver, remember, if the value of gold goes up, so does silver. Anyways, that's it for now. Let me know what you think. I look forward to hearing from you. I'm out.